Good morning to all our Jobs for Michigan's graduates family and supporters joining for Coffee with a Purpose, the final conversation in our three-part series on striving for racial equity. My name is Kristen Harrington, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Executive Director for Youth Solutions, the nonprofit that offers opportunity pathways to education and employment success for Michigan's vulnerable youth. Today, I'm joined by my co-moderator, Charmaine Sanders, who's the director of the Start to Finish program at Lake Michigan College and a member of the Race Relations Board of Benton Harbor. I'm also joined by our JMG panelists, Takedra Masters, Dominique Clay, and returning panelist from our first Coffee with a Purpose, Delanne Pillavant. As always, they are the true stars of this coffee hour, and we'll be hearing from each of them momentarily. At this time, I'm honored to introduce my co-moderator, Charmaine Sanders, who, as part of her role as director of the Start to Finish program at Lake Michigan College, interacts daily with students who face the barriers and biases of inequities that we identified in parts 1 and 2 of the series. Charmaine's extensive experience supporting vulnerable youth through post-secondary education is a tremendous value to this discussion. Welcome, Charmaine. Thanks so much for being here this morning.
Thank you, Kristen. It's great to have the opportunity to engage young people in discussion around action we can all participate in to make real and lasting change. In previous sessions, panelists expressed frustrations and identified biases and barriers they face as youth of color in education, employment, and everyday life. In today's conversation, the youth panelists will share their ideas on how we can all be involved in making change happen to build a brighter future for all youth. I would like to introduce our esteemed JMG panelists, Delanne Pillavant, Pershing High School class of 20, Takedra Masters, Benton Harbor High School class of 2020, and Dominique Clay, JMG specialist working with out-of-school youth through GST Michigan Works, who is formerly part of their Step Into Work program. Thank you all for being here. You have over 80 attendees joining today who are eager to listen and learn from you. Thank you for giving us this opportunity.
Thanks so much, Charmaine. I'm excited you are all joining in this important and timely discussion. For our audience members who wish to ask a question of our panelists, please use that chat function as we'll be monitoring it throughout the session, and we have reserved time at the end to ask audience questions. Also, feel free to use the chat function to share your ideas and ways to be involved in the equity conversation. We'll compile all the ideas from today's discussion into a document to share more broadly within the next few days. So now, with housekeeping aside and coffee freshly brewed, let's get started. First, I'll ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves. Takedra, we'll start with you.
Good morning. My name is Takedra Masters. I graduated from Benton Harbor High School with the class of 2020, and where I also joined the JMG program for about 2 to 3 years. Right now, I'm majoring in biology at Valparaiso University, minoring in chemistry, and amongst all other things, I am also Midwest Regional Youth of the Year for the year of 2020 to 2021 from the Boys and Girls Clubs of America. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you so much, Takedra, and welcome to this discussion. Delanne?
Thank you for having me today. I am returning panelist. I graduated from Pershing High School, valedictorian. I am currently attending the University of Michigan, pursuing a degree in electrical engineering. That's not definite though. And just thank you for having me.
Thanks, Delanne. And we concluded that you're sitting in the same dorm that I was once in. So it's awesome to have that kindred spirit. And last but certainly not least, Dominique.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for having me today. My name is Dominique Clay, and I am 25 years old, a JMG specialist. I am originally from the South. I moved up in Michigan, December of 2018, and I just absolutely love it here. Everything is just so beautiful, and you guys actually have different seasons that I get to enjoy.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dominique, and thank you to all of you for joining in the conversation. Charmaine, back to you.
The topic for today's coffee session is Striving for Racial Equity, Youth Call to Action. Equality is giving everyone the same opportunities. Equity is realizing those same opportunities don't produce the same outcomes for marginalized populations because of the everyday encounters that pose barriers to their success, like biases. With our panel, this conversation will be an idea-sharing discussion on moving toward a more equitable world. To begin, I would like each panelist's perspective. What does an equitable society look like to you? Takidra, let's begin with you.
Thank you. I think that when we have this idea of an equitable society, we start to think about everyone having the same opportunity to succeed, or having the same resources. But if we sit back and we snap into reality, we quickly realize that some people are at a disadvantage before they even enter school. So I believe that now and today, when we do think about an equitable society, we always have to factor in, okay, we need programs that would put these children or these people that are at a disadvantage already to boost them up so that we all can be at an equal level. I think that's programs like tutoring, because at schools where the education is underfunded, we learn less, we retain less information. So I think that when we do think about an equitable society, we should always think about programs that would help the disadvantaged.
Thank you. Delanne?
So to answer the question, I actually Googled equitable just so I could get a better understanding. And I'd like to actually read off the definition. So the adjective is fair and impartial, and then the law is valid in equity as distinct from law. So I just thought it was interesting when I read the part like fair and impartial. There currently in the world society is not equitable. It is not. And going off of what Takidra said, I hope I said that right. Okay. Going off of what she said, yes, like people don't start at the same level as other people. So if we want everyone to be on the same level, so to speak, if we want everyone to have the same opportunities, then we have to acknowledge that people don't start like in similar places that other people start. Like some people start lower than others on like the social food chain, if you will. So it's important to recognize that. And then going forward, like that's the root of the problem. Identifying that other people don't have the same opportunities as others, and it's important to try to give the people that don't have the same opportunities, try to give them these opportunities, try to like help them find their way because they're not as privileged as other people are.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Dominique, what does an equitable society look like to you?
So to me, I see a community working together for the betterment of ourselves. People are, lending a helping hand to those that need it, like a good neighbor. There's no violence or hate crimes or anything. It's just us as people, just like having an ever-growing blossom of love for one another.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What steps, if any, have each of you taken toward the society you envision? And we'll start with Takidra again.
So for me, when I was first entered elementary school and until I reached the 4th grade, I had already had an idea of what I wanted to be in life. I had already known that I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a neurosurgeon. And so because my mom knew that, and she knew that when I was living in this impoverished neighborhood, and the school that we had, it was unfunded education, she decided that I had to go to the school in the next town over because it was in a predominantly white neighborhood and the education was better. But when I switched over to this new school, I was bullied because I wasn't as advanced as they were. I didn't speak like they spoke. I brought my culture to the school and I was bullied for it. Bullied so much that I didn't think that I deserved a seat at the table. And I believe that when we do think about an equitable society, we each contribute differently to this society. So we have to believe that us being ourselves, we contribute to that. So I didn't want other teens and other youth to be bullied out of believing that they weren't worthy, that they had to conform to what everyone wanted them to be. So I created a program to combat anti-bullying. My program called BFF, which stands for Becoming Future Friends. It is a program that helps youth discover who they really are, what their passions are. And we even have unfacilitated discussions in a 100% judgment-free zone where we talk about these controversial topics, from minority voting, youth, adult voting, and we also talk about LGBTQ community issues, just everything that we don't believe that we can openly speak about.
Thank you. That's great. And Delanne, how about you? What steps have you taken toward the society you envision?
I just envision society being, I just want to start off saying, like, I just envision very similar to what Dominique said, like everyone, not like sunshine and rainbows, because it's the world, so we're never going to get that. But something close, something where you don't look on the news and just get like depressed, because the news is so depressing. I envision a society where like not everyone is equal, but everyone is at the same kind of level. And steps that I have taken just in general, just living my life, because ideally I want to see people living their best life. I just try to treat people right. Like, it's not, I think like part of the problem with the whole, not part of the problem with the whole world, I'm not trying to solve all the world's problems, but just thinking about like how you treat people. You don't know what people have been through. You don't know the kind of trauma they have. You don't know the things that, like, people need to realize that the things that they say have meaning, even if it's a joke, even if it's like a little something you can just like sweep under the rug or joke about or laugh about. Like, I have tried to been, since moving to Ann Arbor and becoming, and my like friend group and everyone I know around me becoming more diverse, I try to be very conscious of the things that I say. I try to be cognizant of, like, if I hurt someone's feelings, if I said something that was offensive, I think it's important that people recognize that the things that they say have meaning. And it's not just a matter of like, oh, you hurt that person's feelings. Like, no, like what you said had a deep impact on them, and now they're not doing okay. And you did that. Like, that is your fault. And so I just like recognizing that my words have an effect on people. I try to be very, like, I try to choose my words very carefully when speaking to people.
Thank you. That's great. Being on college campuses helps with that, I think. And Dominique, how about you? What steps have you taken?
So, like Delanne, I live by example. I believe that, everyone should be treated equally fair. Like, there's no discrimination. Oh, like, I don't, like, I just come from a place of openness and like, hey, how are you? I don't look at, whatever else you have going on that, the world will see and like pick on you for. Like, I don't do that. I also educate others, like my friends around me or anybody. I let them know about, how, my culture feels about certain things that may happen or things that may be said. I try to be as open with them as possible so that if they have any questions, they're not afraid to come to me and I let them know.
Thank you. That's great. And actually, Dominique, I'm coming right back to you. So it says, the unconscious bias is the underlying attitudes and stereotypes that people unconsciously have toward another person or group of people that affect how they understand and interact with a person or group. What can a person do to personally address and overcome these unconscious biases?
For this, I would say reflect and adjust. Think before you speak. Ask yourself if what I'm about to say can be offensive or, culturally insensitive in some way. If so, then just adjust your wording for it. And it is going to take practice before you can do it without thinking. But like the more we do it, the easier it becomes.
Thank you. Okay. According to the American Academy for Pediatrics, children learn about racial differences and racial biases from an early age from their parents. Takidra, what can be done to help children grow up with a better understanding of racism and inequity?
I believe that when we are young, we learn so much from our parents because that's who we're primarily around. So I believe that the first thing that needs to happen is for our parents themselves to talk about the issues, whether it's with therapists or their spouses or just any family members before they can encourage their child to speak out. Because a lot of times we don't know how we feel about a certain issue till we talk about it or till we go and find that support system and be like, I feel this way, but I know I cannot raise my child to think like this. And so I think that first, parents need to go out and seek that support, that help, and talk about the issue first, vent for a little, and then be vulnerable to their children. And I think that for children who are sheltered or children who just haven't experienced what it means to be in an impoverished neighborhood, they have to encourage their children to be inquisitive, ask questions, and also predispose them to culture. Have them at heritage events and Cinco de Mayo and help them learn about Black History Month. They need to learn about these things. But first, you have to bring up that issue for yourself and understand what it means for it to be inequity in the world. So I think that first is parents and parents having a conversation so that then you can open it up to your child.
Thank you. And Deland, what are your thoughts?
Can you repeat the question again, just so I can?
I sure can. What can be done to help children grow up with a better understanding of racism and inequity?
So I'd like to bring a perspective on my childhood on this one. So I grew up very similar. I grew up poor white kid in Detroit. It's fine. It's not taboo. It got me into college. So I think I have an interesting perspective on this, but I think it's important to just, I kind of lost my train of thought. Got a little emotional. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah. What can be done to help children grow up with a better understanding of racism and inequity?
Yeah, so going off of what I said, I find it interesting when I meet other people, because this is college. So I'm meeting other people with different backgrounds as me. And they're like, oh my gosh, you lived in Detroit, all of these other stereotypes. And I think it's important to when kids are very impressionable. So when you're saying things around children that you don't want to say things that are not true or is a stereotype. You don't want to feed into that, because then your kid or that child, then they're like, oh my goodness, oh, that's a thing. That's real. People believe that. My mom said that, so that must be true. That's that is just the rationale of children. They're impressionable. So they're and they look up to their parents or their guardians. So they're like, oh my gosh, my mom said that, so I can say that now. It was really interesting growing up and hearing the different perspectives of my my classmates, being a white kid in an all African-American school. It was really interesting because they had this interesting perception of white people, and I wasn't going to change that. But, I said some things where I was like, hey, we don't do that, right? And they're like, really? And I'm like, yes, that's not a thing. I don't know where you got that from, but no. And just making sure that you're cognizant about what you say around your kid and that impression that you have. And I agree with what Takidra said, educating your children about other cultures and things like that. Just being a good human, being just conscious of things that you say and just being a good person in general.
Thank you. How do we change the attitudes of people who think racism is okay or who don't believe inequity exists in our society? Deland, we'll begin with you.
Whew, that's a loaded question. Well, first off, I believe that you can't change anyone's mind they don't want their mind changed. You're not going to change their mind. But there is that influence when everyone around them is this thing is wrong. This thing right here, this is wrong. You should not think this way. You should not talk, act, none of that. And you can only hope that they'll come around. I'm just trying to be realistic here. I want to say that if you tell a racist person hey, don't be racist, they'll be like, oh my gosh, I won't be racist anymore. You can't change that kind of thinking, but you can do your best to show them like it's wrong. You can show them like everything that goes along with like all of that. Like, do you know what you're saying about another human being? Like, forget all of that other stuff. This is another human you're talking about. Sorry, can you repeat the question? I get so ready to say things and then like I just blank.
No, I do the same thing sometimes. So how do we change the attitudes of people who think racism is okay or who don't believe inequity exists in our society?
I think it's a lot easier to fix the inequity, like the idea that like inequity doesn't exist. Like, you can tell a person, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. Like, it's not hard to show people that they have it better off than others. There was an exercise that was done where like a bunch of people lined up on a line, and then they were like, take a step forward if you grew up with both parents, if you didn't grow up with like Section 8, or if you didn't grow up with like food stamps. And a bunch of people took a step forward and they were like, do you see how you are kind of up ahead in life? Imagine that this race is life. Do you see how you're like kind of ahead than all of these other people? And you could see like that aha moment, like, oh, and it kind of dawned on them. So like showing people that there is inequity in the world, showing people that they are a little more privileged than others is like, it's a lot easier to do. And it's not hard to do. So I think it's just like reminding people of their privilege, because they like, and not just reminding them, but like showing them that they have privilege in general, because some people are like, oh, this is normal. Like, I grew up with all of this normal stuff. And it's like, not everyone grew up like that. Now, not everyone has all the stuff that you have. You need to recognize that, and you need to be like cognizant about the things that you say when referencing things that you like, privileges that you have had.
Thank you. And Takidra, same question for you. How do we change the attitudes of people who think racism is okay or who don't believe inequity exists in our society?
I believe that when people have attitudes that racism is okay and that inequity just don't exist, it's because they've been comfortable in this bubble of, I had this growing up and I had this, that they haven't encouraged themselves to walk through those impoverished neighborhoods. Or they never had the opportunity, they had never had anyone stigmatize them or stereotype them because you have your hood on in a grocery store and they think you're stealing. Or because you're walking late at night and your hood is on, but it's just cold, but they think you've done something wrong. They've never had that. They had never had to look over their shoulders and wonder if every time I speak and I'm the only Black girl in the room, I'm speaking for all Black women across the nation. They never had to think about those things. So I think that when we are trying to change the attitudes of people who think that it's so okay and it doesn't exist, we have to encourage them to walk along that street in that impoverished neighborhood, or go 3 or 2 towns over and see how just a couple of streets down, they are living so much differently than you are. I think that a lot of times we lose that empathy aspect. And a lot of times we have to have empathy when we see stuff. So they have to see it with their eyes to understand, oh my goodness, this is real. So I think that a lot of times we just have to show them that in today's world, it's stuff that's happening right under your nose, but you have to be conscious and you have to go and look for it.
Amen. That's a great answer, Takidra. Thank you. And Dominique, now for you. How do we change the attitudes of people who think racism is okay or who don't believe inequity exists in our society?
This one was a tricky question for me because, like Dylan said, you can't change, people's minds, if they don't want to. And then, after, discussing it with my manager and, going over again, we came to a decision and I was like, you know what, this is it. So start teaching our children from a young age about racism and injustice. We need to create that fighting force that says, no, that's not right. There is a post on Instagram that I saw, and there was this young girl going like at it with her parents fighting over, you know, what's been going on. This was like after the George Floyd incident. And she was like, no, like those statistics are wrong. Like you could change those. Like you need to listen like to what people are saying. Like this isn't right. And then her mother was like, no, like, you know, of course these are right. Like they brought this upon themselves. And like the dad was just like, we don't need to care about them. Like that they're not a problem for us. Like we don't need to worry about them being in our lives. And the girl was like, no, that's not right. Like we need to continue to stand up for those whose voices are not heard. Like they're not making this up. Like you think all these people just came up with like this idea to just like start issues. And she was like, no, like sorry. I get emotional talking about, you know, stuff like this. But yeah, she was just like, this isn't right. And I was like, yes, I need more people like her. Like, it just makes me so happy to see other people stand up for what's right. And so, you know, just teaching our children to keep going, you know, no matter what the situation may be, stand up for not only yourself, but for those that maybe can't stand up for themselves. You know, just keep going and just do what's right. So that's my answer.
Thank you. That was a great answer.
So ladies, I would say, you know, first, Dominique, the emotions in this conversation are so real and your words are so powerful. I know that Charmaine and I have the pleasure of being on the screen so people can see us, but I'm confident that there are many tears being shed in the private world of Ring Central where people are really connecting with the power of what you all are saying. To Kedra, I'd note you and I actually attended the same high school. And so your story kind of choked me up a bit, thinking about bullying within the school and your lived experience in some ways resonating with mine and in others being totally different. But I love that you took that experience and started that Becoming Future Friends program. Like, what a way to turn something so negative into something so positive. And I think, you know, that's just such a prominent example in my mind. And I know it picked up in the chat as well, that that's what we're talking about today, right? That there are these real things that are happening in the world that we can't deny, but we have the power to do things about them. And so I think it's just such a tangible example for our audience. Delanne, I noticed that you were particularly emotional when you spoke about your background. Completely optional, but just want to give you a chance. Do you want to elaborate on that at all before we head on to additional conversation?
Yeah, I can share my story a little bit. So it's I think a little bit, I'm gonna go freely here, but I think a little bit of the reason I was chosen to be here is because of like my like diverse background. I'm okay talking about it. Like it gets me emotional because it's like I've been through so much that I'm like opportunities like this make me kind of happy that I've been through so much, because then I get to share it with other people. And then you see that moment of like, oh my gosh, like you went through this. And it's like, yes, I did go through that, but I'm a better person because of it. So my background is my mom, when I was born, she was a single mother. She was hopping from shelter to shelter. So I was homeless as a baby. And then my little brother came into the picture. So then I became a big sister, like 1.5-year-old, like I became a big sister. So that's been a big part of my life as well. So then I kind of like helped raise my siblings because my mom had a couple more kids after that. And we had a stable home for a little while. And then we were back in shelters, but this was a couple years after. So I was like 6 or 7 at this time. And this time it was 3 of us. So my mom was trying to get us a home, and I was basically like raising my siblings. And it wasn't till around freshman year of high school that my life really stabilized. My mom got on Section 8, which allowed us to like get a home. Mm-hmm. And so I had like a stable home around 8th grade year. And and then everything was just like readjusting. And I had missed so much school because like hopping from shelter to shelter, like you change classes. I mean, you change schools, so you miss some things because different schools teach at different levels. So I noticed when I got to high school, there was like lots of gaps in like my education. Like I didn't know how to do division for a good amount of time. It was all very like complicated. But yeah, like when my roommate has a alarm going off, I have no idea how to shut it off. So some nice background music. But can you shut that off? Okay, sorry. Yeah, so it wasn't until like my freshman year of high school that my life like really stabilized, and then I decided I'm like I cannot. I was homeless as a kid. I cannot be homeless as an adult. So I decided I'm like, okay, freshman year of high school, I'm gonna try everything. I'm gonna do everything. So I joined every extracurricular I could, which is how I got involved in JAG, and I'm so happy I got involved in JAG. And I just want to give a shout out to Miss Miller because she is amazing. That's my JAG specialist, and I love her so much. She practically is my mom. She I've met her husband and like her children and everything, and like her daughter is amazing, and she's like my sister. Yeah, so I wrote about all of these things in my essay to getting into U of M. I'm still surprised I got in, but I told them, I was like, hey, I was homeless as a kid. I had to practically raise my siblings. Like I've been through a lot. And some people are surprised. They're like, but you're white. And I'm like, I was white with a lot of struggles in Detroit. Like it happens. And it just makes me so sad when like, it makes me happy and sad at the same time when people of like color, like African Americans, and they see me like in their school or they see me around like other, like all my friends. I don't want to be like that one person who's like, I have lots of Black friends. Like, no, but all of my friends are African American. And they're like, when other African Americans see me with my friends, they're like, she's cool. And I'm like, yes, I promise I'm normal. I'm not racist or anything. Like, I promise I'm good. And it just makes me happy to have like that part where I can be like someone who, like a white person who's cool. Like it's not, and it makes me so sad that other people aren't like, I'm not going to say as cool as me, but like they're not in the same mindset of like, we have to treat people equally. Like there's that, like, I don't know what I'm saying anymore. I got emotional and now I'm just on a tangent and I'm so sorry.
No, thank you so much for your candor, Jillian. Thank you for sharing. And I would say that when you said, I didn't know I was going to get into U of M and I can't even believe they took me, you are the exact person who should be at U of M and they should be lucky to have you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, powerful story.
I'm not crying, you're crying.
Yeah, you guys really just are choking me up over here. So let's talk about everyday life. In your stories, Jillian, you were speaking to some of that. And in our past two sections on this same topic, youth have spoke about the inequities that they've faced in everyday life in general, education, of course, employment. So Dominique, let's start with you. What can a community do as a whole to promote inclusion and unity?
So as a whole, we really just need to have an open mind and open heart when it comes to talking about any injustices, equality issues, racism, anything like that. Come at it as you're wanting to learn and wanting to help. Don't like people when we like talk about racism, like, day to day, people, they have a sense of, oh, that's negative, we can't talk about it. Like, no, the action is negative, being racist is negative, but talking about it is not. This is something that we need to discuss and get more discussing. Just being open and willing to learn about things that you didn't know about, really, or things that you wanted more information on. It's just getting to that point of being okay with talking about racism and everything. It's not as hard as what people think it is about talking about it. Like, just ask somebody. Like I said before, reflect and adjust. If you're gonna if you need to like tweak your wording a little bit, but sit down with somebody and just say, I want to learn more about you and what you go through. And that's a start.
Thanks, Dominique. Takidra, what are your thoughts? What can a community do as a whole to promote inclusion and unity?
I think that something that a community can do to promote inclusion and unity is making sure that for all of these subcultures, when there's like a community project going on, that you have representation at the table. For every subculture in the community, there should be someone with a seat at the table from the LGBT community and someone that represents the African American culture. It's just making sure that you have equal representation. Because if you think about it, we waited so long for our rights as African Americans. So you mean to tell me that we waited 340 years for our God-given constitutional rights and we don't deserve a seat at the table? We need someone who's going to speak about our struggles, someone who know us better, better than someone who can just walk into a community and believe that they know what's going on. So I think that when you're talking about community projects and community say so, it's just making sure that when you have these people coming together to think about a solution, it should be a solution that goes to solve the problem across all subcultures within that community.
Thank you, ladies. And that's an important reminder that inclusion can be as simple as making sure that everyone has a seat at the table. Easier sometimes said than done, but we can certainly all commit to putting that into action. Charmaine, let's hear a bit from you. How can communities participate in open and honest conversations about racial equity?
Well, first I wanted to touch really quick on just something that Delanne and Takidra both said. Delanne, I had kind of the opposite experience of you. I was the Black girl who grew up in middle class white school. And so because of that, Takidra, I'm thinking about you talking about people having a seat at the table. Because of that and the connections that I had growing up, I have gotten seats at tables. And I take having those seats very seriously. And I speak up as whenever and as often as I can. Because I know that if I were from a different community, I probably wouldn't have that seat at the table. It's because of the people that I know. And I think we need to take that seriously. But as far as how we can get communities to participate in open and honest conversations, first, I think it starts with having individual conversations with your family and your friends. With me growing up in St. Joe, where I did, I was often the only Black girl at anything. And my friends and I talked about race. We talked about racism. We talked about these things growing up because even as a little kid, I felt like it was my responsibility to, change the view that people had or to open people to a different world that maybe they didn't have the opportunity beforehand to, to have that experience, to have somebody that could speak from that experience. And so we grew up talking about these conversations. And when I went to college, my friends and I had those conversations. So these kind of conversations aren't difficult for me. I'm open and willing to have these conversations at any time. And so I think that the younger that we start having these conversations, it's really important because if kids become comfortable with it, you guys in your generation, you're comfortable with these conversations because you've been having them. And so you're willing to speak out about them. It's people that are my age and older that are the ones that have a lot of trouble with these conversations. So I think it's just really important. Start at home, start with your friends, have those conversations. But then in a broader sense with community, participate in things like community reads, where a whole community tries to read the same book and then come together for conversations. I know that in our community, They did a community read of the book Waking Up White by Debbie Irving, and then brought people together for conversations around that book, and then brought Debbie Irving to town to have to give a speech about the book and have conversations about it. And I think that that's important. Once you get those conversations and those topics going, usually once people are open to it, they're all in, they're ready. They want to have the conversations. They want to see what they can do to make things change. My personal mantra is that conversations lead to action and action leads to change.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I keep these conversations going. I also think that people getting involved in community organizations like the community grand rounds that we have here in town, or Brave Talks that kind of spawned from the community grand rounds, or like I personally am involved with the Race Relations Council of this area, and getting involved with those different communities can make all the different community organizations, can make all the difference in the world, because they bring you together with different people. And I think that's important.
Wow, Charmaine, I love when you said conversations lead to actions and actions lead to change. And I think that that's the essence of what we're trying to do here with Coffee with a Purpose conversation. So thank you for sharing all of that. How about to our other panelists? Charmaine shared a few of the things that are happening down in the Benton Harbor community in Southwest Michigan around this topic. What are some programs in your respective communities that you believe are making a difference? And how might people who are attending this call get involved? And we'll start with Delianne.
Okay, I'm gonna be honest here. Like, I just moved to Ann Arbor, so I'm not fully aware of like all of the new opportunities that are out there. But I know that I do like the work that the Bursley Hall Council does. I'm sorry, I don't know how to particularly answer this question.
Hey, that's okay. Anything that you saw in the Detroit community?
Okay, now the Detroit community, that's a little different. Can you ask the question again, just so I can?
Yeah, what were some programs that you saw that were really making a difference around you when you lived in Detroit?
Okay, without all of the programs and the opportunities that I had through DPSCD, Detroit Public Community District, and through my high school, I would definitely not be at U of M. JAG is definitely one of these programs. Through JAG, I got an internship at DTE, so I've had gotten great experiences. I've met so many different people. So JAG has really provided an opportunity, a positive. It's a positive program that provides lots of opportunities. Some other programs that I was involved in the community was it's called Sisterhood. It was through the Detroit Police Department, and women in the police department, they would mentor different groups of girls throughout high schools, throughout Detroit. That was a really nice program that I was involved in. Women of Tomorrow, that was another program I was involved in. They gave me a scholarship that pays for my housing, so I love them. Yeah. Yes, Women of Tomorrow, they're amazing. Some other programs I was involved in a lot. I feel like I'm not going to say a name, and then someone's going to text me why didn't you mention my program? Yeah. I'm Sisterhood, Women of Tomorrow, what I would have to say to people who want to get involved in the community in Detroit is just go there and ask the kids, or ask the youth what they need. Ask them what they want. Ask them what they need to be successful. Only they can tell you where they want their life to go and how they want to be successful. And if you want to provide tools to help them, ask them what those tools should be.
Thank you, Delianne. Takedra, what about you, whether that's Benton Harbor community, Valparaiso, where you currently are?
So as far as Benton Harbor, I'm going off of what Delianne said, the JMG program, it really helped my community of Benton Harbor, because Benton Harbor is predominantly Black. And so before I had even entered the JMG program, I didn't even know that there was a certain way to fill out a cover letter, write a cover letter, or, what to wear at an interview, or how to fill out a job application. Because there was a JMG program. And I know I wasn't the only team in my community who didn't know how to do these things. It goes to help as many African American teens as possible so that we can have these resources when we go into these job fields to get jobs. And there's also programs through my Boys and Girls Club, which is the Passport to Manhood program, which help young boys understand that in today's world where you have all of these struggles coming towards you, you are strong, you are Black, and you are a man, and you are capable. Mm-hmm. And a program like Smart Girls, which is the same for girls, to help us understand that even when the world thinks we can't do it, or we won't do it, that we can. We have every right to, and we're very much capable. And I think that some ways that we can get involved with these programs by volunteering through my advisors like Mr. Corey Sterling or Mr. Danny Jennings, and also through my club director, who is also my advisor, Mr. John Sams. And I'm sure their contact information will be provided to you after this meeting. And thank you in advance for anyone getting involved.
Thanks, Takidra. And I know because of those shout outs, we would be remiss not to acknowledge all of those specialists who work so hard to make that programming possible. So you mentioned Corey Sterling, Danny Jennings, who I know are on this call. Same with Carolyn Miller in Detroit, and our newest specialist, Jinx Arnold, down in Benton Harbor. Thank you all for all that you do. Charmaine, I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks, Kristen. So in my work at Lake Michigan College, I work with students who graduated from the Benton Harbor Promise schools, including Benton Harbor High School, Countryside Academy, and CAPE, which is formerly the Dream Academy. My students are mostly students of color from a lower income community, which means that their schools are underfunded and they don't receive the same educational foundations as students from economically advantaged communities. My students don't have access to equitable resources such as updated books, computer labs, or even buildings, which means they often start college at a disadvantage. My students and I have conversations about how they have to work twice as hard to be as successful as a lot of other students because this lack of equitable resources, but that it can be done. Takidra, how do racial disparities in education impact your life?
I think that for me, as I had mentioned previously, I was going to a predominantly Black elementary school and then a predominantly white middle school. And so when I switched over from the school, I thought that they would accept me as being Black. Like, I brought my culture, I brought me, who is a part of me. But what we don't realize is there would be times where I would have my hand raised up the longest. I needed to ask these questions to my teacher, and my teacher would look over me and ask other questions. Or there would be times where I would ask for her help and she would say she was coming to help me, but she would walk past me and help the girl right behind her. What she don't understand is she may not was aware that she was skipping over me. She wasn't recognizing me. And if I weren't to go to a counselor and address this issue, my grades would have dropped. Especially in a school where I'm already disadvantaged and I'm already working twice as hard because I'm determined and I have to get into college because I am a first generation college student. But what she wasn't aware because of this thing called implicit bias. So when teachers aren't aware that there's this Black girl in your classroom, but because you don't usually have this experience with Black students, you don't recognize that at times you're looking over them. And most times they are the ones who need your help most. So I believe that some people do suffer in silence, and when they do, their grades suffer too.
Yes, that is so true. Dominique, how about you? How do How do racial disparities in education impact your life?
So when I was in school, like how you said earlier, Charmaine, I was the only Black girl in my classes. That was like throughout my elementary to like even up to my high school. Like there was few and far that would actually be in the same classes at me. And one of my elementary schools I went to, because my dad was in the Navy, so we moved every 3 years. So I was like at a new school every 3 years. There's one school that I went to, and I noticed that they would separate us, me as a Black woman, Black girl, from the other ones because I was shy and quiet. They considered me to be the good one. So I got placed in classes that were predominantly white. And the ones that they, seemed that, were talkative or they considered to be loud or whatever, they put them all in like one classroom together because they set them up to fail, really. Like they weren't giving them the same teaching opportunities that I was being had just because I was quiet. So that was something that really impacted me when I was growing up. And like Tahidra said earlier, like when I would like raise my hands, like answer questions, they would go all around me and pick the other students to answer. Or some students that didn't even have their hands up, they would have them answer and they had no idea what it was. So it was just that being overlooked and having that different placement go on that just like really like it opened my eyes way wider when that was going on.
Thank you. And I'll actually ask you another question right back to back.
Okay.
What are the biggest challenges you face as a person of color and as a youth with barriers, and how can Amway and other employer partners help?
So for my youth that I see, they don't see themselves as, some of them don't see themselves as, getting to that place that they want to be, where, they're comfortable with themselves, they're strong, they can do this and that. They don't see what I see in them. And it's because of, it being pushed down so much to where they think so little of themselves. And we have to like bring them back up and, help them grow and be like, you know what, you can do this despite what anyone thinks of you. So long as you know what's in your heart, that's all that matters. So it is about, just building them back up again.
Thank you. Takidra, the same question. What are the biggest challenges you face as a person of color and as a youth with barriers? And how can Amway and other employers help?
I think that as a person of color, the biggest barrier that I face is when people overlook my capabilities. Or when I'm in a room and I'm the only Black girl in the room, they believe that if I just mess up one time, that every Black girl messes up or every African American messes up. And at times where they think I'm not capable, it's kind of, I have to basically put myself in a position to show them first before they believe that I am capable. And I think that that's a barrier because a lot of teachers, when they believe in you, they're looking out for the best opportunities for you. But when they don't think you can do it, you aren't aware that there are internships at the local hospital and they're looking for minorities. You aren't aware of that because they don't think that you are capable. They don't think that you can. So I think that that barrier can be helped with teachers that receive the adequate training, especially with diverse and inclusive training.
Uh-oh. Oh, no.
Oh, no.
Takidra.
I have no doubt she'll be back.
Right.
But let's round out the conversation with an eye to the future, ladies. So first question, are you hopeful for the future or concerned as we look to 2021 and beyond? Delaine?
Both. Both. 100% both. I'm definitely hopeful for the future. Definitely new president, new things. And especially with the media and like social media, everything like where that is going. I feel like this whole year has been so bad, but it has been kind of good at the same time. We have our little sunshine spots throughout the year, like conversations like these. I feel like the Black Lives Matter movement really opened eyes, and the fact that that movement started like really has me hopeful because now people are like opening their eye to these problems, like this systematic racism that exists in America. And the fact that people are acknowledging that this exists, I feel like that's like my roommate called it a scooch. It's a scooch in the right direction. It's not actual change.
Scooch.
Nothing's being done. But the fact that people's eyes are now open to it and they're not like blatantly ignoring it, like it doesn't exist. Like this doesn't exist. I think that is positive. I'm concerned for the future because there's always like that level of concern of like what's going to happen now that we have this thing in the works, now that there's this big movement, now that this has been brought to fruition. What's going to happen? What are people going to do? It's not more of a concern. It's more of like a just kind of like on edge, like what's going to happen. I'm on the edge of my seat, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So
absolutely. And what you said resonated with me in both ways, right? Both hopeful and a bit concerned. Thanks, Delanne. Dominique, are you still joining us?
Hi, yes, I'm so sorry. My internet just like went out.
Hey, that's okay. The realities of 2020 life.
Yes.
How about you? Hopeful for the future or concerned?
I am very hopeful. I'm hoping that, we all get to a place where, there's just no more hate for each other. I do hope that big changes can be made. I'm hoping to be a part of that change, continue to be a part, and help out, spread the word, spread the message, help teach our young people that they are important and that they matter. So, yeah, very optimistic.
Thanks, Dominique. And it looks like Takedra may have gotten kicked off of her computer and is trying to rejoin us. So we'll give her another moment. But back to you, Delanne. What's one thing each of us can do to positively impact racial equity?
Like I said before, just being cognizant of the things you say, realizing that when you say things around impressionable children, that has an impact, a very big impact. The people that raise us kind of create that next generation, which is why like we've had these problems in America for so long, because like our grandparents thought it and our parents thought it. So now we think it. And this new generation is now questioning that. So I think that becoming more aware is a step. It's a scooch, as my roommate said. But to fully impact it, I think that I guess I don't really know. A scooch in a direction is really becoming like cognizant of like just how different people live and the different opportunities that people have had. And it's very important to just recognize all of these things, because like some people just don't know. Sometimes it's out of like just plain ignorance. They're just like, wow, I didn't even realize that these problems existed.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, well, what can I do? So I think like the people that realize it and want to help, I think it's important for people that have the opportunity to create an impact should create an impact.
Thank you, Delanne. And Takedra, I see you're back with us now. We'll give you the final word. What's one thing each of us can do to positively impact racial equity?
I believe that one thing that we can do to positively impact racial equity is by just taking parts in communities, no matter if it's your community, the next community over. I think that a lot of times when we have something good, that something that we achieved or something we've done good, I kind of always tell myself, when my community pours into me and I achieve something or I accomplish something, it is only right if I give it back. So what someone does for you or what you accomplish, it's your responsibility to make sure that you can advise, or you can go to the soup kitchen to help out, or the food pantries, or whatever the case may be, to help out the next person. I believe that we don't have to step on each other's back to succeed. And instead, we can give them a hand. We can help them reach the same level that we are at. So it's just by forcing yourself to be uncomfortable and forcing yourself out of your bubble to ensure that there's someone else that you are given the opportunity to succeed.
Wow, thank you. And thank you to all of our audience for joining us today and forcing yourselves out of the bubble to hear this rich dialogue. This does conclude today's Coffee with a Purpose conversation. My immense gratitude to Takedra, Delanne, and Dominique for your candor and vulnerability. You ladies are phenomenal. You will run the world one day, I have no doubt about it, and I am going to be cheering you on every single step of the way. You truly represent the very best of the Youth Solutions organization and our Jobs for Michigan's graduates programming, and we could not be prouder or more grateful to each of you. Thank you, of course, to Charmaine, our phenomenal co-moderator, for joining on this important topic. Your voice and insight was tremendously valuable in moving this conversation from learning to action, just as you noted earlier. Thank you, as always, to our audience for your time, energy, and interest. This does round out our three-part series on striving for racial equity. However, our journey is just getting started. Our panelists provided us with action steps to move toward a more equitable world, and there were many outlined today. The compiled list of these actions will be shared with all in attendance today. Feel free to share them out with your broader network. The Youth Solutions team will hold ourselves accountable for participating in the suggestions, and we hope that you all will too. We won't be back together for another Coffee with a Purpose session until the new year. The next event will be held in February as part of our legislative activities for JMG Youth. More information will be forthcoming, and make sure to be on the lookout. As we head into the holiday season, we hope you'll consider ways to engage with the Youth Solutions organization to provide more opportunity pathways for our young people. An easy way to get involved is through our employer and post-secondary engagement opportunities, where you can serve as a guest speaker, provide a business talent tour, or engage as a mentor. You'll be joining the ranks of companies like Steelcase, Consumers Energy, DTE Energy, Spectrum Health, TCF Bank, Centene, Amway, Lake Michigan College, and Kalamazoo Valley Community Colleges. And of course, in light of COVID, all of these opportunities are being offered virtually. To get involved, visit www.ouryouthsolutions.org, and that's O-U-R, youthsolutions.org. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you have a wonderful and blessed holiday season. Be well, and we'll see you back here in the new year for Coffee with a Purpose. Thanks, everyone.